What is up, myth-loving people? Today we'll be looking at the major Mesopotamian gods. First we'll do a bit of a background, and then look at each god and goddess individually, with some myths sprinkled in between. Now, the Mesopotamian civilization existed for well over 3,000 years, from the formation of the first cities at the end of the 4th millennium B.C.E. to the early years of the Roman Empire. During this period, religion was a major factor influencing behavior, political decision-making, and material culture. Ancient myths, legends, ritual texts, and images show that most gods had human or human-like forms, were male or female, and reacted to stimuli with both reason and emotion. Being similar to humans, they were often considered to be unpredictable. Their need for food, housing, and care mirrored that of humans. Unlike humans, however, they possessed a splendor called milamu, which was a radiance or a type of aura that each god embodied. Many gods were associated with astral phenomena, such as the sun, moon, and stars, while others were associated with the forces of nature, such as winds, fresh water, and the ocean. Others with the real animals like lions, bulls, and oxen, and others with imagined creatures, such as fire-spitting dragons. As supreme figures, the gods were transcendent and awe-inspiring, but they were distant. Feared and admired rather than loved, the great gods were revered and praised as masters. They could display kindness, but were also fickle and at times could be poor decision-makers, which explained why humans suffered such hardships in life. Generally speaking, gods lived a life of ease, while humans were destined to lives of labor. Humankind was created to ease the gods' burdens and provide them with daily care and food. Often aloof, the gods might respond well to offerings, but at a moment's notice might also rage and strike out at humans with a vengeance that could result in illness, loss of livelihood, or death. The gods were also associated with cities. Each community worshipped its city's patron deity in the main temple. The sky god An and his daughter Inanna were worshipped at Uruk, Enlil, the god of earth, at Nippur, and Enki, lord of the subterranean freshwaters, at Eridu. A city's political strength could be measured by the prominence of its deity in the hierarchy of the gods. For example, Babylon, a minor city in the 3rd millennium B.C.E., had become an important military presence by the Old Babylonian period, and its patron deity Marduk, noted in a mid-3rd millennium text from Abu Salabik as ranking near the bottom of the gods, rose to become the head of the Pantheon when Babylon ascended to military supremacy in the late 2nd millennium. While the great gods of the Pantheon were worshipped by priests at rituals, in cultic centers, ordinary people had no direct contact with them. Instead, they worshipped personal gods in their homes, thought of as divine parents and as deities who could intercede on humans' behalf, to ensure health and protection for their families. Now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at the gods themselves. Highest in the Pantheon, and presiding in the divine assembly, ranked Anu in Akkadian, god of heaven, who was responsible for the calendar and the seasons as they were indicated by their appropriate stars. He was the divine personification of the sky, and ancestor of many of the deities in ancient Mesopotamian religion. He was regarded as a source of both divine and human kingship, but at the same time, his role was largely passive, and he was not commonly worshipped. Per the Sumerian creation myth in the prologue to the epic poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the Underworld, at first there was only Namu, the primeval sea. Namu gave birth to An, the sky, and Ki, the earth. An and Ki mated with each other, causing Ki to give birth to Enlil, the god of the wind. Enlil separated An from Ki and carried the earth off to be his domain, while An carried off the sky. Enlil reigned in the city of Nippur, and was the god of winds and agriculture, creator of the hoe. Enlil executed the verdicts of the divine assembly. Enlil meant Lord Wind, with both hurricanes and the gentle winds thought of as his breath, and eventually as his word or command. He was also sometimes called Lord of the Air. Although An was the highest god in the Mesopotamian Pantheon, Enlil had a more important role as the embodiment of energy and force and authority. The myth of the creation of the hoe describes how Enlil separated heaven and earth to make room for seeds to grow. He then invented the hoe and broke the hard crust of earth, and mankind sprang forth from the opening. Equal in rank to An and Enlil was the goddess Ninhursag, also known as Nintur and Ninma. City goddess of Adap and of Kish in the northern herding regions. She was the goddess of the stony, rocky ground, the Hursag, and had the power to produce wildlife in the foothills and desert. But as goddess of birth, she is not only the goddess of animal birth, but the mother of all children, a mother goddess figure. Enki, also known as Ea, was god of the sweet waters of rivers and marshes. He was the smartest of the gods and a great troubleshooter, often appealed to by both gods and humans. He was originally the patron god of the city of Eridu, but later the influence of his cult spread throughout Mesopotamia and to the Canaanites, Hittites, and Hurrians. He was associated with the southern band of the constellation called the Stars of Ea, but also with the square of Pegasus. The planet Mercury was also identified with Enki, but was later associated with Marduk's son, the Babylonian Nabu. In the myth Enki and Ninhursag, the goddess complained to Enki that the city of Dilmun did not have enough water. As a result, Enki made the land rich, and Dilmun became a paradise. Afterwards, he and Ninhursag slept together, resulting in their daughter Ninsar, who was also called Ninisig and Ninmu, the Lady of Greenery. When Ninhursag left him, Enki spotted Ninsar walking along the riverbank. Not knowing her to be his daughter, and because she reminded him of his absent consort, Enki seduced Ninsar, who gave birth to Ninkura, the Lady Fruitfulness or Lady Pasture. Ninsar left Enki, and in his loneliness found and seduced Ninkura, who gave birth to Utu, the weaver or spider, the weaver of the web of life. After Enki had intercourse with Utu, Ninhursag removed the semen from her womb and planted it in the earth, causing 8 plants to spring up. Curious as to what the plants were, Enki ate them, effectively eating his own seed, and became pregnant in his jaw, his teeth, his mouth, his hip, his throat, his limbs, his side, and his rib. As Enki lacked a birth canal, he seemed to be dying with swellings. The fox then asked Enlil, king of the gods, "If I bring Ninhursag before you, what shall be my reward?" Ninhursag's sacred fox then fetched the goddess, who relented and took Enki's semen into her own body, giving birth to the gods of healing of each part of the body. Enlil's son was the moon god Nanna, also called Sin, who reigned in Ur. An important aspect of Nanna's cult in Ur was the institution of the En priestesses, who were daughters of kings. A number of cultic songs dedicated to Nanna mention them, sometimes by name. Their residence was known as Gipar, while in the Old Babylonian period it was combined into a single complex with the temple of Nanna's wife Ningal. Sargon of Akkad's daughter, Enheduanna, was a particularly famous En priestess, known for her many temple hymns and poems dedicated to Inanna or Ishtar. Another prominent son of Enlil was the god Ninurta, city god of Girshu in the Lagash region. Ninurta was originally the Sumerian god of springtime thunder and rainstorms, and of the plough and ploughing, but was later considered a deity of war. In the Old, Middle, and Late Babylonian myth of Anzu and the Tablet of Destinies, the Anzu was a giant, monstrous bird which Enlil appointed as the guardian of his sanctuary. One day, while Enlil was preparing for his bath, the Anzu betrayed him by stealing the tablet of Destinies, a sacred clay tablet belonging to Enlil that granted him his authority. The rivers dried up, and the gods were stripped of their powers. The gods sent Adat, Gera, and Shara to defeat the Anzu, but all of them failed. Finally, the god Ea proposed that Ninurta, Enlil's son, be sent. Ninurta confronted the Anzu and shot it with his arrows, but the Tablet of Destinies had the power to reverse time, and the Anzu used this power to make Ninurta's arrows fall apart mid-air, reverting them to their original components. Ninurta called upon the south wind for aid, which ripped off the Anzu's wings. The god Dagon announced Ninurta's victory in the assembly of the gods, and, as a reward, Ninurta was granted a prominent seat on the council. Enlil's other children were the underworld figures Meslamtaea, Ninazu, and Inugi, the attendant and throne-bearer of Enlil. Meslamtaea was the city god of Kutha in Akkad, and appears in hymns as a warrior similar to the war god Ninurta. Meslamtaea's weapons, however, was sometimes turned against his own people and their herds when he killed them in great plagues. Ninazu was the city god of Enegir, located on the Euphrates River between Larshu and Ur, as well as of the city Eshnunna, modern Tal al-Asmar in eastern Iraq. Ninazu, whose name means water knower, was associated with snakes and vegetation, and with time acquired the character of a warrior god. He was often associated with Ereshkigal, goddess of the underworld, either as her son, husband, or simply as a deity belonging to the same category of underworld gods. Nanna's sons were the sun god and judge of the gods Utu Shamash, the rain god Ishkur, Adat, and his daughter, the goddess of war, love, and the morning and evening star Inanna, the Akkadian Ishtar. Utu Shamash was god of the sun, who, with the moon god Nanna and Ishtar Inanna, the goddess of Venus, formed an astral trinity. Shamash exercised the power of light over darkness and evil. In this capacity, he became known as the god of justice and equity, and was the judge of both gods and humans. While at night, Shamash became judge of the underworld. In the Sumerian myth Gilgamesh and Humbaba, Enkidu told Gilgamesh that he should ask Utu for permission before they embarked on their journey to Humbaba's dwelling. After learning that Gilgamesh wanted to acquire fame because he knew he would not live forever, Utu granted him 7 constellations, described as zoomorphic creatures, meant to guide him to his destination safely. Humbaba later tried pleading with Utu when he was about to die, but his prayer was unsuccessful. Ishkur was the god of the rain and thunderstorms of spring, and was the city god of Bit Kakuru in the central steppe region. In his role as god of rain and thunder, Ishkur corresponded to the Sumerian deity Ninurta, and was identified by the Akkadians with their god of thunderstorms Adat. Adat Ishkur presents 2 aspects in hymns, incantations, and votive inscriptions. On the one hand, he is the god who, through bringing on the rain in due season, causes the land to become fertile, and on the other hand, the storms that he sends out bring havoc and destruction. Nanna's daughter Inanna was the goddess of war and sexual love. An important goddess in the Sumerian pantheon, she came to be identified with the Akkadian Ishtar. In her earliest manifestations, she was associated with the storehouse and personified as the goddess of dates, wool, meat, and grain, with the storehouse gates being her emblem. She was also the goddess of rain and thunderstorms, leading to her association with An, the sky god, and was often pictured with the lion, whose roar resembled thunder. The power attributed to her in war may have arisen from her connection with storms. Inanna was also a fertility figure, and, as goddess of the storehouse and the bride of the herder god Dumuzi, who represented the growth and fecundity of the date palm, she was characterized as young, beautiful, and impulsive. She was known as the Queen of Heaven, and was the patron goddess of the Inanna temple at the city of Uruk, which was her main cult center. Inanna appears in more myths than any other Sumerian deity. Many of her myths involved her taking over the domains of other deities. She was believed to have been given the Mes, which represented all positive and negative aspects of civilization, by Enki, the god of wisdom. She was also believed to have taken over the Inanna temple from the sky god An. Alongside her twin brother Utu, Inanna was the enforcer of divine justice. She destroyed the Mount Ibi for having challenged her authority, unleashed her fury upon the gardener Shukaletuda after he raped her in her sleep, and tracked down the bandit woman Bilulu and killed her in divine retribution for having murdered Dumuzi. In the standard Akkadian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Ishtar asks Gilgamesh to become her consort. When he refuses, she unleashes the Bull of Heaven, resulting in the death of Enkidu and Gilgamesh's subsequent grapple with his mortality. Inanna Ishtar's most famous myth, however, is the story of her descent into the underworld, ruled by her older sister Ereshkigal. Check out my related videos on this particular myth and these two goddesses, links in the description below. Inanna's ill-fated young husband was the herder god Dumuzi, the Akkadian Tammuz, god of fertility who embodied the powers of new life in nature in the spring. As shown by his most common epithet, Sipad or shepherd, Tammuz was essentially a pastoral deity who had the power of everything that a shepherd might wish for: grass to come up in the desert, healthy lambs to be born, and milk to be plentiful in mother animals. His cult centered around 2 yearly festivals, one celebrating his marriage to the goddess Inanna, the other lamenting his death at the hands of the demons from the underworld. In one myth, which forms the second half of the Sumerian myth, the Descent of Inanna, Inanna sends Tammuz as her substitute to the underworld. His sister, Geshtinanna, eventually finds him, and the myth ends with Inanna decreeing that Tammuz and his sister may alternate in the underworld, each spending half of the year among the living. The most feared Mesopotamian deity was the goddess Ereshkigal, who ruled the underworld with her husband Nergal, a figure closely related to Meslamtaea and Ninurta. The main temple dedicated to her was located in Kutha, a city originally associated with Nergal. The two main myths involving Ereshkigal are the story of Inanna's descent into the underworld and the story of Ereshkigal's marriage to the god Nergal. Other myths also associate her with gods such as Ninazu, originally regarded as her husband but later as a son, and Ninkishida, a god of vegetation, the underworld, and sometimes war. And then lastly we have Marduk, patron deity of the city of Babylon. When Babylon became the political center of the Euphrates Valley in the time of Hammurabi, around 18th century BCE, Marduk slowly started to rise to the position of the head of the Babylonian Pantheon, a position he fully acquired by the second half of the second millennium BCE. He presided over justice, compassion, healing, regeneration, magic and fairness, although he is also sometimes referenced as a storm god and agricultural deity. As the national god of Babylonia, he was eventually simply called Bel, meaning Lord. After defeating Tiamat, as told in the Enuma Elish, he became Lord of the gods of heaven and earth. All nature, including humanity, owed its existence to him, with even the destiny of kingdoms in his hands. Thanks for watching. If there are any myths, gods, goddesses, or mythical creatures that you would like to know more about, leave a comment down below and I'll gladly make a video about them. In the meantime, welcome to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate your support. Till next time, bye bye.